Hi everyone, thank you all so much for coming out today. I'm thrilled to have four of our incredible ODU Art Faculty who are represented here in Message in a Bottle, here to speak a bit about their work while it's still up on view. This show comes down on January 5th, 2025, so you've got just under a month to tell your friends and family to come out and check out the show while they still can. I'm going to introduce the four of our professors here in alphabetical order. So we're starting with Brendan Baylor. Brendan is a professor of art, teaching printmaking and 2D seminar here at ODU. He has an MFA in printmaking from the University of Iowa. His work is behind you on the red wall, titled Return, Proceed, Help To, from 2024. Brendan is an interdisciplinary artist whose work spans printmaking, installation, and digital media. Brendan explores the politics of space, uncovering hidden histories, and the systems shaping our landscapes. His practice makes visible the unseen costs of economic and political systems, challenging us to rethink our relationship to the world around us. Brendan uses materials like coal dust and laser engraving to connect his art to the systems he critiques. His work balances information and emotion, addressing urgent environmental and social issues in ways that inspire and provoke. Next, we have Peter Dudenbach, former art department chair and current professor of art, teaching foundational concepts, sculpture, and senior show for BFA students. I think maybe some of the students are in this room. He has an MFA in sculpture from the Ohio State University. He has two pieces on view. We have Flotsam Jetsam right in front of us here, as well as Holocene from 2013 on the blue wall. Peter uses sculpture, video, installations, and curatorial projects to explore the relationship between function and absurdity while challenging our expectations of the commonplace. I didn't mention that Brendan actually has a second work of art that we turned down just for the sake of hearing, but the audio that you've been hearing in this space as well is another work by Brendan, sort of an ongoing project. In a bit, we'll have you please explain that project itself too. But here is a bit of the sound clips from this ongoing soundscape project he has going. The third artist I'll be introducing is Melissa Hill, Systems Support Technician for the ODU Art Department. She's also taught foundational concepts, color theory, 3D foundations, sculpture, and assemblage. She has an MFA in Art and Visual Technology from George Mason University, and her piece is here behind me, concurrently from 2024. Melissa's interdisciplinary work serves as both a mirror and a guide to her own self-discovery and exploration of the human condition. Beginning with themes of family, loss, and memory, Melissa's artistic journey has evolved into a broader inquiry into the constants and the changes that shape our existence. Her work reflects the fascination with both the intimate and the vast, from the smallest atoms to the boundless cosmos. She examines how shifts in perspective transform our understanding of reality and our place within it. And lastly, we have John Rowe, ODU Art Department Chair, and he also teaches sculpture and furniture design here. He has an MFA in painting and sculpture from my alma mater, Go Badgers, University of Wisconsin. He has two pieces on view. One is right in front of us here, Cretaceous Mode from 2010, as well as Cortege for the SS Epi from 2002 on the wall in the corner. John is a sculptor whose work distills the essence of his life experience into tangible forms, drawing inspiration from life's many facets: travel, relationships, politics, and dreams. John weaves these elements into his art with a passion for object making that began in his youth. His fascination with scale models of railroads, cars, ships, and planes inform much of his work, giving it a unique sense of precision and nostalgia. John's sculptures often explore hybridization and polymorphism, blending elements of reality and imagination to create works that are as thought-provoking as they are visually striking. A quick intro to this side of the gallery. We're looking at Message in a Bottle, sort of the then and now. So on the blue side of the gallery, on the other side, we have sort of the then side. So we're looking at often oil paintings from the 17th and 18th century, from masters of maritime painting. And on this side, we're focused on a more contemporary way of looking at maritime culture. So whereas 19th century painters often depicted the visible parts of maritime culture, particularly its ships or ports, The artists represented here often are examining the invisible aspects of maritime life, from the infrastructure of modern shipping to the intersections between water and cultural memory. Their works also engage the complicated legacies of maritime history and culture. If 19th century maritime paintings focused on technologies that could enable global connection, the artists featured in this section examine the positive and negative results of that connectivity. So with that, we'll get started into an informal discussion about the works. So to get started, I'd love if the four of you could go along and give us, in your own words, a description of your piece and maybe a bit of inspiration about why and how this piece came about.
Yeah. All right. Hey. So I have two pieces in here. I have this large kind of tiled out print on the red wall there, and then I have the sound environment that is playing when the show's on view during normal visiting hours. So both of my pieces are kind of related to my time spent here in Hampton Roads. So thinking about the way that our place as kind of a port city in the US connects us to a lot of different historical and contemporary places and systems. And so with the print piece, I made this piece in 2019. I made a small version of this piece, and I thought it would be interesting to take that piece and blow it up and try to make it large scale. So when I was having a studio visit, kind of thinking about participating in the show, the curator and the museum director asked me like, "Oh, how big do you think you could make this print?" And I was like, maybe 6 feet. And they were like, "Great, you should do that." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I committed to making this giant. Great. So this piece was kind of taking that initial seed and blowing it up and creating something kind of more expansive out of it. So I'm quite pleased with the way that it came out. And a lot of it was just kind of thinking about these shipping containers, these ports, and kind of trying to locate my own relationship to it, So thinking about my position as a consumer and how it relates to, the global flow of goods and kind of that impact on climate change. So it's all in there if you look at it hard enough. Yeah, and I think I'll talk about the sound piece later on. I think this is good now. So.
Hi. So my work is kind of a continuation of the series that I've been doing, and I've lived in this area my whole life. My family's been here for hundreds of years, and water is really influential. And I started doing research on the effects of sea level rise because I was seeing it in real time, being from Chesapeake, and how much the landscape has changed. So I have been looking at that and looking at things like global warming, and I found this material. If nobody ever really guesses what it is, but it is insulation bags. And it started with me being my conscious self, being like, I can't throw these away because they're going to end up in the ocean. And I had a stack of these delivery bags like this. And then one day, I decided, well, this is just fabric, if you look at it. And these pieces were born from that a lot. This one is following the shipping routes coming off of the coast of Virginia. And while on the surface, that's what it's about, again, this material is important because it's insulation. And I'm questioning, what are the shipping routes doing? Now, shipping routes are lifelines to our local economy, but they also leave an ecological footprint. And this insulation of water, how much are they contributing to that? How much are they affecting the local ecosystems as well? Because our shipping doesn't just rivers, all the way up through the Chesapeake Bay. And we all know what happened in Baltimore recently, and how much that affected Chesapeake Bay and also as well. So, I'll stop there. Thank you.
So I'm going to talk mostly about the cortege for the SSFE. It's this diorama piece. And so it was part of a series that I called Speculative Naval Architecture. And the series began when I moved to Athens, Ohio, which is ostensibly a landlocked location. And so me being a Midwesterner in the Great Lakes, I was kind of craving significant bodies of water. And this craving came out with a series of oddball ship models. And so this one in particular has a very direct relationship to the travel that was referred to in my introduction. So this whole scene happened, and I came across a shipwreck in Newfoundland. It's kind of a subarctic environment there, and there's the remains of this ship that sank around 1970. So anyway, I built this up, and as a woodworker, I think about the woods I choose. I think about issues of sustainability, and you can choose wood for content reasons, for hardness, for color, all these things. In this case, the woods I used on this case and on the little model are all traditional shipbuilding woods, boat building woods. At the time, I was very interested in, perhaps at some point in my life, building an actual wooden boat. And who knows, aging out, that may not happen, but so the outer case is made out of white oak that is fumed with ammonia. The little model ship is made out of pine mahogany, and the sarcophagus, the little container there, has this piece of teak that was the decking on the SSFE. I confess to you, I took a piece off this deck, but it was the teak deck laying in this subarctic environment that triggered this. And I just stuck that thing in my baggage, in my luggage, and forgot about it for like 3 years. And then my kid brings home this book about the wreck of the SSFE. So I got the whole story about this Newfoundland dog saving everybody on the ship. And it's a great story. I'll tell you all about it some other time. So this piece here is a more visceral. It's more visceral in origin. I work a lot of my ideas out with gobs of clay, so I have plasticine clay in my studio. So in this case, I just took a piece and I squeezed it and I extruded it out between my fingertips, and I started to see something. So I started to work in dialogue with that motion of squeezing the clay, and so I worked it out, tweaked it a little bit, and then this actually became this Cretaceous mode, which originally had wheels on it, because when I moved to Hampton Roads, I didn't care so much about ships anymore. I wanted stuff with wheels on it. So this had wheels on it. And I took it off so I could get it in the show. But this has over 10,000 scales glued on from a process I've been working out since I worked in a factory. But I don't want to hog this, so hand off to Peter.
Thanks, Dave. So I never knew that this had an anthropomorphic origin to it. I mean, it always looks to be very reptilian or serpentine, but that, yeah, that came from that kind of fist playing from that, just from the hand.
That's how it started.
Yeah, maybe I'll say a little bit about the piece here, Holocene, on the plinth in the middle of the room. Holocene, as many of you know, refers to the era when mankind, humanity emerged as far as the different periods of the Earth's history. There is some who believe we're in the Anthropocene now, or maybe we're still in Holocene. That's a whole separate conversation. Leonardo, among the many things he explored during his lifetime, one was a mountain where he found clams embedded in a rock on the top of the mountain, which he was wondering how did these things get here. And of course, what we know now is that those were fossils from an earlier time. That area, that part of the Earth that was now a mountain, or Leonardo's time was a mountain, had originally been the seabed. And things like that always make me wonder, shells are one of the oldest forms in nature. And much of what we know about their preservation in the fossil record is much of what we know about earlier chapters in Earth's history. And I sometimes wonder, well, what will be left? What will we leave behind? I mean, if there are ever, maybe there won't literally be fossilized shipping containers, but outlast humanity, will probably outlast even certain geological, you know, phenomenon. And so a container is a container, you know, a man-made container, and shells are the one form of container that both live on land and in the ocean. So it's kind of fusing those two associations with space. The color, I just like the particular color, and I deliberately didn't put any graphics on it related to any of the companies, like you see in the photograph on the wall. If this were ever, what I would love to do eventually with this piece is have a full-scale version of it made, which would be where the large door that you see would be the size of a real container and would gradually spiral around. And if you walk around the piece later, Kevin, already, there are small doors on the upper end. It was important to me to have doors on both sides of the container so that you have that ambiguity. Do you win the small doors and not the big one, or do you win the large doors and, you know, enter this shrinking world almost like Alice in Wonderland? This enlargement or reduction, you can operate in, it could be read rather in both directions. But if the piece were outdoors, I think we would want to be a different color. It would probably be on a green space, in which case we probably want to be orange, even if it wasn't a Hoplock Lloyd, you know, print on there. If Hoplock Lloyd wants to pay for the fabrication, I'm glad to put it, or whoever wants to say, I don't know, great naming opportunity for anyone who's and so yeah, probably orange or yellow or something that would pop off of the environment depending on what was installed. The concept drawing for that, well, this is actually a series of lithographs that I made afterwards. The original concept drawing, when it was right out of my head, was a post-it note, a little 3x3 post-it note. And so when, I still have that, but I, based on that, made this lithograph, six little photographs on, you know, trace paper. That's framed out a little behind it. The piece above that, the container in a bottle, again, another, getting back to containers within containers. I used to make ships and bottles when I was a kid. I grew up in the Northeast in Newport, Rhode Island, another shipping town, although not as much of a working waterfront as we have here. And so I was always intrigued by just a lot of, obviously, growing up, a lot of what you would see was, you know, anchors outside of a seafood restaurant, and, you know, bad reproductions of paintings like in the other gallery. You know, the originals are quite wonderful when you really see them there. I was really amazed when this show first opened, or when the gallery first opened, and there were a lot of these out in the main gallery, that, you know, the original oil paintings of some of these, you know, maritime scenes are really wonderful. Normally what you see are, you know, poster versions in the waiting room of the doctor's office or that kind of thing, and so they don't really have the, you know, the same power to them, the same effect. And so yeah, this sort of just came to me intuitively. I suppose I could have photoshopped a container within a bottle, but I'm just not good enough in Photoshop. So that is actual a small model container, you know, train model set that I carefully cut the back of the bottle and from the back part and put this in there. And so no photoshopping. It's resting on actual sand. Other than there were a few areas where the glare from the lighting, I had to fix those. But if you look at it really closely, even those expiration dates that are printed in really small numbers on the side of the bottle, all of that's in there. I felt it really had to have a, you know, a physical presence, even though the shadow cast on the sand, everything, just that it should look believable as if this thing was washing on the shore.
Thank you.
Sure. So I think as we run over to questions, we'll take questions.
Yeah, I've got a couple more questions for you.
Okay.
I can see, you know, most of you have at least gone to school in the Midwest. You've moved kind of all over the country. Some of you more than others. But I'm curious how living on the coast now informs your studio practice. And did that change when you moved to this area, if you moved to this area? For those of you that it's applicable.
We'll start with Wisconsin.
Sure. When I first moved to Norfolk, I was fascinated. In fact, when I came for my interview, they put me up in a hotel downtown Norfolk. And so I woke up in the morning before my interview, and I was walking around. It was called the Tazewell, something anyway. So I woke up and I turned the corner, and there was the bow of the USS Wisconsin. For some reason, I didn't know it was here. And so I look at that as, of course, as a word machine, but it's also a fascinating piece of metal sculpture. And when I finally walked around on it, there were so many inspirations in there that kind of fed into this series of speculative naval architecture. I actually built a piece that was one of my first forays into the coated foam phone technology that this is. And it was related to, I tied in things about my childhood as being a militaristic kid and all this stuff that was, fascination with warfare and Civil War stuff. And so it was all tied up into that piece. I don't have it out. I didn't like the results. So that did have an impact on me. The other thing is, when I was a little kid, my grandfather had this huge illustrated volume of Civil War history with all these old lithographs in it. And I distinctly remember the depictions of the battles of Monitor and Merrimack in there, and that stuck with me. And so when I moved here, I thought, well, here I am at that. I'm not sure how that's going to affect my work, if at all directly, but it's just interesting to have that connection come full circle for me. Anybody else?
Sure. Yeah. Well, for me, my practice has emerged out of moving and constantly finding myself in a new place, and so a lot of my practice is about understanding and relating myself and my experiences to this new place that I find myself in. It's a form of inquiry and kind of like knowledge building. And so with moving here to Hampton Roads specifically, my work is mostly thinking about our relationship to non-human beings, to the larger kind of expanse of living creatures, and kind of like what we do socially and economically in those places. And so kind of landing here in Norfolk, which, in many ways, Jamestown is right up the road, so that, we're really ground zero for the expansion of, colonialism and capitalism into the continent. To be here, it gives me this like incredible archive that is the landscape to work from. So I think for me, it's not necessarily the things that I would personally like to see in a landscape, but there has been a lot to investigate and explore and understand, and history here is very deep and rich. And the landscape is like very beautiful and inviting, and there's so much here. It really has been a great place to be making work and thinking about these sorts of issues. So yeah, so I really love it here now.
Great.
Yeah.
13 years.
Yeah, and I think people are like interested. Like we're at this moment where we're thinking a lot about resilience. We are kind of, just in my 7 years I've been here, I've seen the water rising. I've seen more prevalent flooding in the areas where I live and work. So I think that we're like the changes that we're all experiencing are very palpable here. And so I think that there's an interest in thinking about landscape, thinking about our relationship to the larger global economy and climate, because we see it every day when we drive to work. And I think that that's a very powerful thing.
Can you tell us a little bit about that other work of art that feels very related?
Sure. Yeah. So in terms of like sound stuff, so recently, my most recent project is Sound Map for a Changing Landscape. It's changinglandscapes.org. You can go check it out. And basically, I've created a platform where people can upload images and sounds related to changing landscapes around them. And this is a platform that is using an open maps, kind of like a Google Map framework, so you can upload things related to anywhere. We've got different sounds and images from across the US, and then also some stuff now from Europe as well. So we've had a lot of people uploading material. That could be like a sound recording of a place that's important to you. That could be like a memory. I've uploaded some interviews with folks about their experiences with changing landscapes. So we'd really love to have more material as part of that archive. So kind of like creating an archive that we can experience that relates to the landscape, which is also a kind of archive that we of a different sort, that we also experience. And that piece was recently exhibited in front of the museum as part of the Public Art Festival, the kind of physical installation of that. So, and a lot of the sounds that are in the sound environment here are sounds that I collected as part of that project. So many of the sounds are from the local environment, kind of listening for, you know, the way that the landscape is changing and all those resonances.
I have one more question before we turn it to the rest of the audience. I'm hearing so much from all four of you about thinking about art as a time capsule, thinking about these very present issues at this moment. So I'm curious, as you're engaging with historical and contemporary elements simultaneously, how do you hope your work will be understood or interpreted by future audiences?
So I approach a lot of my work, so I've done a lot of installation work, large pieces that take up whole rooms and create an environment that transports viewer. So when I'm working on these wall pieces, they're usually about half the size. This one's a little bigger than normal, but I want to think of it almost as a small snippet into a different universe, a place of contemplation, a place where you can reflect, if you want to pun there, on where you personally are in the world as an entity in space. And I think that using the material that I'm using, it's plastic and aluminum, basically, if you want to break it down to its basic elements. It's inert, it's not going to degrade like paper does. It's going to last forever, and I just hope it doesn't last forever in the ocean, basically. And there's this sense of wonder, for me at least, when I make these pieces and I'm done with them. That the way they absorb their environment, it doesn't just catch the light, it catches the colors that are around it as well. And I myself am just I'm just in awe. I can transport myself, so I hope that other people can also do the same. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, so with this work here, it's I'm retelling a story, and I'm retelling the story of my finding out about the story, and I'm retelling it as a sculptor would, with hopefully that's something that would resonate. There's heroism in it. There's drama. If you get into the nuts and bolts of the story, basically that's it.
I don't have anything. I mean, I guess, you know, with the Flotsam Jetsam piece, the one at the top of the wall, I titled it that way on some, you know, Flotsam and Jetsam are used kind of interchangeably, but Flotsam refers to anything that has been fallen overboard accidentally. Jetsam is anything that's been tossed overboard deliberately. If the boat needs to lose weight, or if you're in a hot air balloon and you need to gain altitude, you throw other things overboard just to, and so it's a deliberate thing. So the deliberate and the accidental, you know, when things are made deliberately and then when things either, you know, happen accidentally in the creative process, there's a little bit of that feeling to that piece. And along with what I mentioned earlier about ships and bottles, I used to, when I was a kid, you'd always be at the beach and you'd put messages in bottles and throw them in the water, you know, like a treasure map or something, whatever. And we remember being at the, you know, when you're 4 years old and you're after at the beach, it might only be 2 hours, but somehow when you're that age, it feels like you've been there for 2 years. It feels like endless. One sense of time, I don't know if it's just being on the water or whatever. And I remember once throwing something into the water, and maybe, it was probably in real time, about 45 minutes later, I look and I see it, you know, coming back in this bottle, not realizing that I could, you know, the time was coming in when I threw this thing in the water like half an hour ago. I saw, oh my God, someone's got my message. And they've replied. You know, because again, once there's a time, obviously this thing could not have gone all the way across the Atlantic Ocean or whatever, and all the way back, before it is what you do. And so I run out and pick this thing up and open it, and of course realize it was the thing I threw in the water half an hour ago, whatever it was, So that's probably the closest to an archive as I'm going to get.
It's interesting when I look at the materials of a lot of these pieces, yes, some of these will outlast a lot. And others will not, the wood, for example, but I see Melissa's piece lasting till the end of time. Maybe that plastic bottle as well. Well, I'll turn to the audience if anybody has any questions for the artists while we're here.
I had a question. I need to do for class. John, I want to know, did you take a piece of teal off the Wisconsin when you were there? For deck?
I did not, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that experience. Walking around on the deck of that ship, there were all these things built on there. I had no idea what they were supposed to do. And so it worked as an art experience for me because it instilled a sense of wonder in me. And so it's like, I just can't let it go. I gnaw on it for a while because I didn't know what it was. So I think I was able to take that kind of open-mindedness and ignorance about what all these things on the ship did to make it into a meaningful experience for me. But no, that's the other thing.
If you need some material, I know you can find some of that.
Okay.
I always collect.
I'll get your information too. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Does anyone else have a question?
I'm glad that you mentioned your installation work because that's kind of the first work I saw of yours, and so seeing this, I can't not also have that memory of your three-dimensional work. So I see it almost as like a compression of that, and obviously it's not really flat because of the wrinkles of the space and the energy that's within it, which is just kind of a long-winded lead up to. Can you talk more about how you physically put it together, your method, how you made it?
It is, so again, it's these sheets of foam insulation, stuff that either deliveries get shipped in or used to insulate your garage door. And what I do is it's usually double-sided and I strip it, I cut it into strips and then I strip it into two sides. And that gives me a thick piece and a thin piece. And then I go through these like flat strips that are about 2 inches and I fold them all over and then I either sew them straight or glue them or staple them depending on what I have usually. And then after that, I always start out with a concept sketch. I know that it's abstract, but I do look at actual ocean currents and do sketches based on those. So then I take my canvas, do the sketch out, and then just start laying these strips that I've processed down with a lot of adhesive. This thing weighs like 150 pounds probably, and I can't pick it up. It's more than that. And I would say probably about 50% of the weight is the adhesive. But yeah, that's that, and then I build a frame.
Do you look at ocean currents for your larger pieces too? Is that kind of always your theme?
Yeah, so
Your sculptural ones?
yeah, so for my installation piece, big installation piece I did for Google, and I actually took part of the Potomac River, and it's near Bear Island. Sorry, I talk with my hands. And I took it and I circled it in on itself. So I was looking at the way that the island was shaped and how the water flowed around those land masses in that area. So even if it's a river and not just an ocean, I'm always looking at how the water flows.
You translate it nicely into that material into lines.
Yeah, thanks. And I can point out areas on it if anyone wants to talk to me afterwards.
I think my elbow is by first landing, right? Yes. First landing, the edge of the coast. Any other questions? Well, then I have one more. Brendan speaks specifically about his complicity in climate change and his reliance on shipping services. I think we can all relate to that. So how can artists address their own role within the systems that they critique, but maybe specifically thinking about climate change and global shipping? How do you,
Yeah. Well, okay, so for me, you know, kind of thinking about, you know, critiquing oneself or just having oneself in the work. For me, you know, I'm often looking at larger social systems, and I think that without my experiences of those systems are through my individual experience. So to a certain extent, I'm always a part of the systems of that work because I am the instrument through which I experience them, right? I'm a person in the world, and so I experience the world through my experiences. So I think in many ways, like, my work is about my personal experience, and so when I'm speaking about larger systems, I'm kind of always in there. I would say, for me as an artist, I try to make a point of making that more explicit or more visually apparent. And so, you know, in this particular piece here, I included, I took the buttons from the Amazon homepage and I digitally superimposed them onto the sides of all the shipping containers, right? Because I think it's very easy to say, you know, such and such a thing is destroying the planet and it is terrible. And it's like, well, yeah, obviously, right? But like, why does it exist in the first place, right? It exists because it's nice to click a button and, you know, get goods delivered to your house and not have to, you know, put on real pants or whatever it is, you know, right? So it's like our own desire for convenience and the certain ways that we're pacified as a group directly kind of helped to build these systems. So I think for me, as I work from my own individual experience, I always try to make it apparent for others. And I think in general, as we seek to change systems, whether that's as artists or people in general, I think if we're not being self-reflective about the things that we make, whether those be art pieces or social systems or movements, we're not going to get away from the problems that exist in our current society, right? Because we have to be thinking about how those things manifest within our own creations, our own dreams, and our own hopes and aspirations and all that kind of stuff. And so I think, you know, for me, that's not necessarily just an artist thing. I think it's like being a person in the world, right? Like, this is what I hope to instill in my students when I like work with them. But yeah, I think it's that self-reflexivity and taking those same tools that you hone and making sure that you're being as honest with yourself as you are, you know, when you look at the rest of the world. I think that it's crucially important.
There was a thing just in the Times this morning on what goes into same-day delivery.
Yeah.
I just focused on that, yeah.
Yeah.
Want to tell us the story of the Labrador saving, was it, or the dog, Newfoundland saving the people?
Yeah, they're Newfies. So the SS Etty went down off the shore of the northernmost part of Newfoundland in a January gale, and it kind of went up on a shoal several hundred yards from, or maybe 100 yards from the shore, and turns out a fisherman was walking by with this Newfie dog, and they got the dog to swim out with a rope in its mouth. They rigged up what commonly be known as like a zip line. It's called breeches buoy in maritime parlance. And so they put a little baby in a mail bag and they swung the baby back to shore, and everybody got off safely due to the heroism and the robust nature of the Newfoundland dog. You know, and so I've set up my own little story, commemoration per se of like a dignified funeral for the Effie. So that's what this is all about. On the high seas.
Well, if we just got a couple minutes left, so I'd just love to hear what all of you are currently working on. Just maybe one little sneak peek into the artist studio at this point.
All right, since I have the conch, I mean the microphone, if you know that reference, there it goes. Lord of the Flies.
Oh,
Alright, so I'm working on another diorama per se, and it's called Loose Cannon Misfire, and there's kind of like an orange hair in it, orange hair smoke form in it, and careening down a hill. And I'm building a case out of wood that I've recently become acquainted with. It's called Rainbow Poplar, and it's really stunning and busy and gorgeous, and kind of a challenge because it's kind of splintery, but yeah, that's what I'm working on.
A number of things, I tend to work on several things at the same time, but one thing I've been most focused on lately is something adapting to clawed glass. Some of you may know what that is. It's a convex black mirror. It was used by landscape painters years ago for a way of kind of bringing the breadth of the horizon to a narrow control field, and a way of distilling some of the light and some of the contrast that you would have in clouds or kind of daylight today. So called the clawed glass because it's associated with Claude Monet, the French painter. It was also used by people who didn't paint, who would just bring these with them when visiting the English countryside. And so they would take these small glasses they would carry in their pocket, hold them out like this to look at the landscape behind them. So it's not terribly different for people doing this now when we're on vacation or in a museum or whatever. Obviously now they're drawing that's with their phone. And so I'm less interested in that serendipitous analogy between cell phones and these optical instruments, and just kind of just playing with them a little bit. So not quite sure where it's going yet.
Realistically, I'm working on holiday presents, but as far as work goes, I am developing a series of 7 circular pieces that's going to be looking at the ocean currents of the 7 seas, basically, and teaching myself how to frame circular objects too. So,
But this same process of concurrently.
That's awesome. I mentioned it already, but yes, Changing Landscapes, continuing to work on that. Hopefully hearing some good news soon about grant funding for another iteration of that project. So that's what I'm working on, changinglandscapes.org. Go upload some sounds.
Yeah. Be a part of this work of art.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for coming and joining us today. It's great to hear from the artists.
I'd just like to say thank you, Susie, for doing this, and Chris and the whole staff here. It's been a wonderful experience for me. So thank you very much.
Fabulous. Well, it's been incredible to speak with some of your students about your work on View. I think it's how inspirational to go to the classroom and learn from you, then to come see you in the gallery space. It's incredible. So,
Teaching tool.
yes. All right, well, thank you all so much for coming out. We've got some free Vessel Craft coffee on your way out. We'll just ask that you keep it in the lobby if you enjoy some. And this is our last activity hour for this semester, but we'll come back in January. Every Thursday during the semester, you can join us for free coffee and some sort of incredible art intervention. So we hope to see you next time. Thanks, everyone.